woman leaves her village after discovering something disturbing about her lover. He thinks it's because she saw him talking to a nude, mythical creature, but her reasoning is far more unsettling. And things get even more complicated with a magical firebird that travels through time and messes with their fate. But you can get involved in their stories and fix these disruptions while meeting strange creatures and characters from Slavic mythology, experience ancient folk festivals, and even get high on mushrooms. And that's the Polish indie game called The End of the Sun. Hi, I'm Anna, a villager from Transylvania with an unhealthy obsession for researching the culture and history of this region. So if you want some excessively detailed videos about these topics, stay tuned because I have a lot of fun content for you. Today I'm bringing you a Polish indie game that perfectly represents one of my favorite subjects, the culture and mythology of the Slavs, especially Poland. Plus it involves village drama, which as a village girl is my bread and butter. So without further ado, let's dissect this topic. The End of the Sun is a first-person story-driven exploration game set in a Slavic fantasy world. It's a magical investigation, traveling through time, exploring ancient lands, and meddling with villagers' fates, all while tackling heavy themes like grief, guilt, and regret. The game was written and designed by Jakub Maczowski and Kinga Maczowska-Rapała, so shout out to them. The oldest post on their blog dates back 9 years, and honestly, once you see all the tiny details in the game, you will understand why it took that long to make. The game features a mini open world design with multiple seasons, day-night cycles, weather systems, and characters shown at different ages, all built in Unity, which is impressive on its own. Some of you might know that I dabble in programming. I'm actually a soulless corporate software engineer doing completely different kind of work, but I've studied Unity a bit, and let me tell you, it's hellish to work in, so hats off to the team. The game's world was partially modeled after the houses of the Zalipie Village Museum and the Schönberg Museum, two places that I've been planning to visit for years because they inspired Velen in The Witcher 3. The Zalipie Village Museum is especially famous because it includes works by the iconic Polish folk artist Felicja Zurowa, whose painting style is visible in the game too. But enough with the yapping, let's get to the actual story. At the very beginning of the game, we meet the two main characters, Nadimir and Mira, who are in a heated argument, as Mira reveals that she is leaving the village. Then suddenly, boom, a firebird appears, freezing time, and that's Rarog, a fiery Slavic demon, similar to a phoenix, sometimes depicted in folktales as a falcon, a dragon, or even a tiny lucky bird. According to mythology, Rarog hatches from an egg and can transform into a whirlwind, bringing fire and storm wherever it goes, both respected and feared for its power. We play as an Ashter, a sage or sorcerer gifted with the ability to travel through time, and using the village herds, we chase after Rarog, solving puzzles in a mini open world setting. In the Polish version, instead of Ashter, the word Żerca is used, a reference to the Zerts, the priest in Slavic religion, whose name roughly means one who makes sacrifices. Most of what we know about Slavic priesthood comes from Old Latin texts describing them performing sacrifices, knowing cosmology and divination, and setting the dates of festivals, which fits this game's world perfectly. Also, my OG subscribers might notice some interesting references in the opening scene, like the statue of Svetovit, the god of abundance and war, often shown with 4 heads, and the drinking horn, symbolizing his strength and spiritual power. The plot follows a non-linear timeline, showing different stages of Nadimir and Mira's lives, from childhood to elderly age across the 4 seasons. We can switch between these timelines at the bonfires, and most can be explored in any order, though some are locked until you complete earlier events. After stabilizing each timeline, we unlock some stunning cutscenes and receive a fiery feather, and we gotta catch them all. So basically, it's a game with the cultural aesthetics of The Witcher, the gameplay style of Grey Dawn, and the exploration mechanics of Dark Souls 3. The area where we switch between timelines also looks incredible. I think it's meant to represent Prav, the realm of the gods. Basically, according to some old Slavic myths, the world was born from a cosmic egg which hatched and split into 3 parts, parts, and its essence gave rise to the three fundamental realms: Prav, the divine or spiritual order; Yav, the material living world; and Nav or Navia, the realm of the dead and spirits. In this area, each season can be accessed through a statue of a different god or goddess. Spring is represented by Mokosh, the mother goddess and protector of women, childbirth, and the household, symbolizing fertility, faith, harvest, and rain, and she is connected to farming and craftsmanship. Interestingly, some sources say that she was worshipped at altars shaped like large breasts. Summer is represented by Svarog, the sun god known for metalworking and craftsmanship, and according to some legends, Svarog sleeps and his dreams create the human world, and if he ever wakes, it all ends. Autumn belongs to Veles, the god of the underworld and chaos, and he is often portrayed as a trickster but not as a pure evil, because like most Slavic gods, he is multifaceted, linked to water, cattle, wealth, poetry, and oaths. Winter, of course, is represented by Morana, the goddess of death, winter and decay, and associated with cold, sickness, and famine. She is traditionally banished each spring when people burn or drown her effigy. Instead of doing the normal thing and showing you straight gameplay, I will go through the events in chronological order, give a brief story overview, and explain the cultural and mythological references without spoiling the plot, so you can experience it for yourself. So with all that set up, let's check out the spring timeline. I just found out that you're not subscribed to my channel.
Why?
Subscribe. In the spring timeline, we meet Nadimir as a child and soon discover that he is not exactly the cleverest cookie in the jar. Like, really not the brightest.
Carpenter Isper, let's dance!
Nadimir, what have you done?
When I accidentally set him on fire, you were angry. Yet now you're burning him yourself?
We get to enjoy the beauty of their family home, which was modeled after a house in the Schönberg Museum. And before we enter, we might notice birch leaves hanging from the rooftop, traditionally used to scare away evil spirits like the Mora or Kikimora, but more on those later. And the game even explains different household items and their historical uses. There's this beautiful fireplace decorated with Suruivoa's painting style, and there's also some kolovrat or sunwheel symbols representing the sun, eternal life, and the cyclical nature of existence. It's important to note that unlike Norse or Greek mythology, ancient Slavic paganism left very little written or visual evidence, and many symbols and beliefs associated with it actually come from Rodnovery, which is a modern Slavic pagan movement that seeks to revive and reconstruct the pre-Christian religion and rituals of the ancient Slavs. On the table there's some dandelion, which in ancient Slavic folklore carried a surprising amount of symbolic and magical significance, considered a protective plant against evil spirits, curses, and nightmares. And since they are one of the first flowers to appear in spring, they symbolize renewal, fertility, and the sun. Now, in my village, there's a superstition that dandelions can cause chickens to stop laying eggs if they see one, so my great-grandma would always yell at me if I brought them into the yard. On the table, we can see some pisanki eggs that actually predate Easter and Christianization, symbolizing life, birth, and renewal, originally used during the spring equinox. Traditionally, they were dyed with natural paints made from onion skins, plants, tree bark, or soot, and the three main decorating methods were scratching off the paint with sharp tools, applying beeswax to create patterns before dyeing, and melting it off afterwards to reveal the designs, or pressing a small leaf against the egg, wrapping it tightly in cloth, and boiling it in dye. And by the way, my grandma taught me that the best thing to use for wrapping them is pantyhose. And after we deal with Nadimir's tomfoolery and find an object representing what I did to your mom, we get to celebrate a proper Polish Mikus Dingus by dousing his mom Dobromira with water while she's trying to cleanse the house from evil spirits.
As tradition goes, only the most beautiful ladies get doused during the revival festival.
Shmigus Dingus is the playful splashing or sprinkling of water on others, traditionally boys on girls, because water symbolizes spring cleansing, renewal, and good luck. It began as a pagan spring ritual symbolizing fertility and purification, later evolving into an Easter tradition after Christianization, and it remains especially popular in Central Europe today. Further away there's another house. It was modeled after a house in the painted village of Zalipie, but in this timeline it lacks the iconic painted flowers, but don't worry, that will change later. If you enter the bar nearby, you'll immediately find a little painting of the Rodzanice, the fate-weaving goddesses who determine a child's destiny, appearing on the third night after birth to assign luck, wealth, and life path. There's also an object leaning against the wall representing your mom. This house's atmosphere isn't quite as cheerful as the previous ones. There's a dead guy on the table, and as someone who grew up in 90s Eastern Europe, I should probably not say anything about this. And then we find a card depicting a Mora, an evil spirit who visits people in their sleep, stealing their life energy and causing terrifying nightmares. She's said to slip through keyholes and sit on her victims' chests, making it hard to breathe, sometimes even causing death. And to protect themselves, people painted symbols on doors, wore clothes inside out, and kept garlic nearby. And it can also be tricked, so having an Ashter's powers here is pretty useful. Then we get this amazing cutscene.
Znowu przebudzona z krainą bogów wszystkich połączyła.
At another bonfire, we see Nadimir's dad building a bridge, and we have to help him out or he will... But don't worry, this won't be the last time you need to prevent that from happening. Then we run into a very pregnant Samodiva. Now I mostly knew this character from South Slavic mythology, described as an enchanting nymph who lives near lakes and rivers, described with long flowing hair that can either heal or harm people. And obviously they can manipulate men with their beauty and enter their hearts. And in this story it's explained that women who die by drowning can turn into the undead Samodivas, a trope common across different mythologies, much like the Ukrainian Mavka. This Samodiva has an interesting conversation with Nadimir's dad, Dalimir, suggesting that something may or may not have happened at last year's Midsummer Night, which may or may not have involved a copious amount of alcohol. Later, at a different bonfire, we connect to another event where we find a little card representing a creature you might recognize from the Witcher games, Drowners. These are likely a reference to the Utopiets, a drowned spirit, often the soul of someone who died by drowning, especially a child or unbaptized infant, that lurks near rivers and lakes, waiting to pull people underwater. Parents used this legend to warn kids not to play near rivers after dark, which is exactly what Dobromila tells Nadimir. But he insists on going to get some bird sap, so we head to the orchards at the riverside. In one amazing scene, we get to experience what the PTSD nightmare of the Teutonic Knights after the Battle of Grunwald might have looked like, as the trees start to whisper to us in Polish. Then you get to experience what my personal nightmares sound like, a baby crying by the river while some butt-naked drowners try to grab it. But the badass lady that Dobromila is, she fights off the Utopiets, so things take a pretty dark turn, and that wraps up Nadimir's childhood story. Next we can travel to the summer timeline to see if he becomes any less of a numbskull over time. It's the summer solstice and we're back at the iconic painted house, but this time it's occupied by someone else, a young lady named Mira. I really like the fact that these buildings change a bit over time in different timelines. Now it looks even more like that iconic house from Zalipie. Before they can go to the Midsummer Night Festival, Nadimir has to help her out with some chores and he drops this bar.
How am I supposed to grind grain when there is no quernstone again? Oh, I'm a poet and I didn't know it.
Then we find this beautiful statue of Svarog, and fun fact, the game used photogrammetry for a lot of its 3D graphics, which is a technique that scans real objects and turns them into 3D models. So this statue was modeled after a real handmade sculpture by Bartosz Matura. And my god, this man's work is awesome. You can find it on Instagram and it's absolutely stunning. And surprise surprise, Nadimir forgot to get Mira a gift for Kupala night.
I forgot the gift for Mira. So, no love during the Kupala night.
Man SMH. And then he tries to give her her own statue as a gift.
Something like this neither will help me nor bring me a husband. Besides, you took it from my quern.
Of course, we can't have a game about Slavic culture without experiencing a good old Midsummer Night celebration. Basically, Midsummer or Kupala Night, celebrated around the summer solstice, is an ancient folk holiday honoring the sun and the forces of nature, fertility and renewal. Though the church tried to suppress it in the 13th century, it survived by blending with St. John the Baptist's feasts, and it's a great example of a pagan tradition thriving within a Christian context. The festival involves young couples jumping over bonfires for good luck, and the highlight is girls floating their flower wreaths or vianki on the rivers while young men try to catch them. And I really enjoyed the design of this segment because I love that instead of unnecessary rendering of a bunch of villager NPCs, they used these minimalist fire silhouettes. Later, when we try to help Nadimir catch the wreath, we can walk by some villagers making out, some girls doing some drum and bass moves to a fire rendition of Igedis. And this segment made me love this song so much. But later, another segment actually made me hate it. There's also Polish fan being Polish. Another element of Kupala Night is mugwort, a plant believed to be one of the most powerful tools against evil spirits and curses, and it was often burned like incense in homes, carried in pockets, and hung above doors and windows to ward off demons and witches. And given that I'm allergic to it, I would say it works. During Kupala Night, people burn it for purification or to banish bad luck. Then we get this amazing cutscene. I love this game so much. A common custom in Slavic, Baltic and Romanian cultures during the summer solstice is looking for the fern flower in the forest. Now, legend says whoever finds it gains great fortune, wisdom and even the ability to understand animal speech. But it's guarded by spirits and demons, and seekers who find it often lose their souls or vanish in the woods. The thing is, ferns are actually spore-bearing plants, not flowering ones, so obviously the fern flower doesn't exist, but that impossibility is part of the myth's magic. It was always meant to be unattainable and otherworldly, or, you know, an excuse for couples to wander off in the dark woods together to, quote-unquote, find the fern flower, if you catch my drift. Then the game shows a cutscene that perfectly explains why women live longer than men.
Maybe these lights are trying to guide us to the fern flower.
Those are will-o'-the-wisps. Let's not follow them. Don't you know the stories? They're the souls of the wicked who lead you astray.
I'll be back soon.
I can't let him go alone.
I absolutely loved the defeat in her voice, like, she sounds so done with his bullshit at this point. And yes, the will-o'-the-wisps, or bludichka, considered dangerous in Slavic mythology. They are spirits appearing as bluish lights in swamps or cemeteries, believed to be lost souls. And they lure travelers off safe paths, especially if you mug them, but occasionally guide the lost to safety or treasure. You can protect yourself from them if you wear your shirt inside out, and honestly, Nadimir looks like the kind of guy who would do that unintentionally. The lights lead him to an abandoned castle's ruins, which shouldn't be a surprise, we are in Poland after all. Then we find a giant oak tree, which is important because in Slavic mythology the oak was seen as a sacred bridge between the human and spiritual worlds, central to many rituals and offerings, especially tied to Perun, the god of thunder, lightning and war. Then the Samodiva shows up, waiting to be drawn like one of your French girls.
I want you to draw me like one of your French girls.
She promises to give you the fern flower if you prove your word, and we learn the castle's backstory. The Samodiva explained that it was once ruled by a greedy king whose cruelty destroyed his people, which is a common trope in Slavic legends. The best known example is the story of Popiel II, a semi-legendary 9th century ruler who angered the gods. So thousands of huge aggressive mice emerged from a lake, stormed his castle and devoured him and his wife after they fled to a tower. And this gruesome end marked the fall of the Popiel dynasty, and legends say Popiel's lost crown still lies at the bottom of the lake, bringing luck to whoever finds it. And yes, that's the story referenced in the Witcher 3's Tower of Mice quest, and the location of that quest was inspired by the real Krushvica castle tied to this legend. The Samodiva asks Nadimir to fetch the king's most precious belonging, which is of course his crown, and we get these amazing scenes.
A ghost? Wanders? Fine. I'll look for it. What was that? I think I'll pass.
We can help him by solving some puzzles, and I looked up what these symbols mean. The first one is the hands of God, the second is Kolovrat, or the sun wheel symbol. I'm not sure about the third one, it looks like the Celtic Triskelion, but it might reference Triglav, the three-headed god, or Rod, the triple god, symbolizing the unity of sky, earth and the underworld. Now, if any of you know what this actually is, make sure to drop a comment. Well, I know that the other one is the symbol of Veres, the god of the underworld, and there's the thunder wheel or Perunica, symbolizing Perun, and finally the symbol of Svarog. Then the Samodiva tries to raise up Nadimir, and Mira has a totally valid crash out when she catches them.
Nadimir! What's going on here?
We get dragged underwater, and then we find Rarog's egg. But I gotta say, the soundtrack here really slaps.
Oh, fuck! The bridge is rising!
Of course, I had to replay this scene in Polish for reasons.
O kurwa! Most cię podnosi!
Meanwhile, we find out that time was not kind to Nadimir's dad, Dalimir, especially to his hairline, and we finally see where Nadimir got his impeccable wit from. He tells us a disturbing story from his drunken days that clearly unsettles Mira, and honestly there's nothing worse than the moment when an older relative or family friend drops a random piece of traumatizing lore. And this brings us full circle to the intro scene where Nadimir tries to give the egg to Mira and she reveals that she's leaving the village. Hashtag relatable. And that's where we move on to the autumn timeline. During the autumn timeline, we get to see Mira return to the village, and Nadimir, of course, manages to embarrass himself. We find out that it's Forefathers' Eve, or Dziady, an ancient ritual honoring the spirits of ancestors, traditionally performed in autumn and spring, most popular in Eastern Poland and East Slavic countries. Participants would light fires, leave offerings of food and drink, and recite prayers or chants to communicate with the dead. Since people believed the veil between the living and the dead becomes thin on that day, there were, of course, many superstitions surrounding it, especially prohibitions against doing certain kinds of work. Most importantly, sewing, weaving or spinning were strictly forbidden, so as not to tie up a wandering soul that couldn't return to Nav or Navia, the realm of the dead, a spiritual plane inhabited by ancestors and spirits. Possibly the most famous literary reference to this ceremony is Adam Mickiewicz's 19th century poetic drama Forefathers' Eve, which is referenced even in The Witcher 3. In a rare Mira elf moment, she manages to piss off a spirit who starts causing some ruckus, and we get to find objects to calm it down. like a scythe symbolizing death and unfinished business, a washboard representing daily work, and a spinning wheel symbolizing entanglement. And on the table we also see the hands of God symbol representing divine protection and the balance between spiritual and earthly realms. And this symbol has a pretty dark history. Basically, a vessel with this design was found in 1936 during an archaeological excavation in the village of Biała in Poland in a 2nd or 3rd century grave. This was possibly the grave of a woman because there was a spindle whorl and needle found nearby. During World War II, the Nazis used this artifact for propaganda purposes because some of its symbols look like you know what. And they used it in posters and articles to quote-unquote prove the so-called Germanic origins of Polish lands and justify the occupation, which is pretty similar to what the Russian bots are doing on the internet when it comes to topics about Ukraine. Nowadays, this urn is popular for that specific design, especially the symbol known as the Hands of God, and it's been adapted by modern Slavic neo-pagans as a religious symbol. Anyways, the spirit leads us to a scene showing that Dalimir isn't doing well, like really not well.
Since he stopped drinking, all he does is collect these mushrooms.
Another key part of all Ziadi celebrations were the Kraboshka masks, which were ritual masks used in ancestral ceremonies honoring the dead, especially in Polish and Czech traditions. And people believed these masks helped participants summon and communicate with the dead, or even temporarily embody them. We can run to another bonfire, and going through this area gave me total childhood in the village flashbacks. Autumn always felt mixed to me because there was a lot of garden work and school started, but we also went apple picking and hiked through the orchards, which made it worth it. Also in my village we harvested corn by hand and families would work together, and my favorite part was gathering in the barn to peel the husks and toss them into a big soft pie so I could climb a ladder and jump into it like a crunchy pillow. Plus every autumn we visited the cemetery to celebrate the ancestors and see relatives we only met once a year. Anyways, in the game we get to explore the cemetery in details, and I really like the statues here, especially the horned depictions of Veles, the god of the underworld. The middle tree looks great with a carved face and the symbol of Veles based on a real sculpture by Bartosz Maczura. Kraboshka masks hang from the branches and food is set out on the table for the ceremony. There's also an ark decorated with the Tree of Life symbol and other signs taken from the funerary urn from Biała, which is a very cool detail. Dalimir is of course getting high on mushrooms again, which shouldn't be surprising because in ancient Slavic traditions, hallucinogenic mushrooms like fly agaric were believed to have magical or spiritual properties. Zirt and other spiritual figures often used them in rituals for divination, communicating with spirits, or inducing visions, acting as a bridge between the living and the dead. And to understand what Dalimir is actually up to, we get to join him on this trip. 0 out of 10, I do not recommend. I love how in all these Slavic games, getting high has become a trope, like in The Witcher 3, that quest where Roach starts talking, or that time you get high with the village ladies in the woods in Kingdom Come Deliverance. And after some tomfoolery with Dalimir, we finally get to celebrate Forefathers' Eve properly with some real East Euro vibes. And to make things even more authentic, Nadimir and Dalimir get into an altercation because, of course, every village has that one family. At the next bonfire, we witness what's possibly one of the most unhinged moments in video game history.
I can finally end it. Reunite with my beloved. That damn dull thing won't even scratch me. Sharp steel. The suffering is over.
At the same time, Nadimir once again proves that his frontal cortex still hasn't evolved to a fully adult level.
But at least he made some mushroom soup. I feel sick.
You weren't supposed to eat that. Do you want to die, you fool?
To be fair, given who raised him, we shouldn't be surprised. The last bonfire of the season gives us one of my top 3 favorite cutscenes in the entire game. Mira and Nadimir finally make up, proving to the world that even if you have negative risks, you can still pull a baddie like Mira. Though, let's be honest, there is not much to choose from in a village dating pool. I mean, as long as someone isn't your direct relative, is somewhat clean, and occasionally sobers up, you're good to go. Anyway, it's a really beautiful scene. Now let's switch to the final timeline, the elderly days of Nadimir and Mira during winter. It's a winter night, and we're back at Nadimir's old house where he lives together with Mira, and for some reason he's still unable to help out with anything.
Nadimir, churn some more butter.
I've been whipping the cream for a long time and not a single drop of butter.
The house is also covered in poop, and a strange noise is coming from the barn. Turns out Mira forgot to feed the household spirit, the domovoi. And these are spirits that must be treated with kindness and give offerings like bread or wool, so they'll bring luck and peace. But if you ignore or anger them, they bring chaos and pain, like messing up your house. As we clean up his mess, we find out that they are preparing for Kolyada, a winter solstice celebration honoring the rebirth of the sun and the cyclical renewal of life. And the most popular tradition tied to this festival was going from house to house, singing songs, something that was later absorbed into Christian culture and mixed with Christmas caroling. Now before we can confront the domovoi in the barn, we need to take the spinning wheel off the rooftop, take the flax out of the Svetovich statue's mouth, and grab Kolyada's wreath from the dung pile. And this reminds me of when I used to make an advent wreath as a kid, except I didn't have fir trees nearby, so I always used tuya. Anyways, evergreen branches, especially fir, pine, and spruce, were common symbols of eternal life and protection, and they were used to decorate homes, doors, and shrines to keep away evil spirits and welcome the returning sun. And over here we can see how the fuck do you pronounce that? Podwaźniczka?
Podłaźniczka.
Podwaźniczka? We can see a podwaźniczka on the wall, a traditional Polish and Slovak Christmas decoration that hung on walls or more often above the Christmas dinner table. And of course we can't celebrate the winter solstice without a good old diduk, a winter decoration mostly popular in Ukraine these days, made from sheaf of wheat. Diduk literally means grandfather spirit and was traditionally made from the first or last stalks of wheat harvested during the year, and it symbolizes a household's wish for abundance and a bountiful harvest in the coming year. And it was believed that the spirits of the family ancestors resided in the diduk during the holidays, and while it stood in a place of honor, the souls of all ancestors would unite and bless the families. And honestly, it looks really cool. Heading to the barn, the domovoi makes us solve some puzzles, and every time you mess up, it tortures you by singing Polish folk songs. And this is the moment I started hating Idzie dys. I love that this guy knows like 5 different songs, and every time you mess up, he just picks a new one. And I almost forgot how unhinged Polish folk lyrics can be.
Za górami, za lasami, za dolinami. Hej, pobili się dwaj górale ciupagami. Hej, górale, nie bita się. Ma góralka dwa warkocze, podzielita się.
Now that we know why your mom wears her hair in 2 braids, we have to count some objects to solve the puzzle. And honestly, counting pumpkins isn't even close to the weirdest thing I've done in a barn. Hashtag just village girl things. Going back to the house, I got a Dark Souls flashback, seeing the bonfire in the distance, and if you've been around since the old gaming days, you know I love this game, but I'm also really bad at it. Still, it's so peaceful watching those distant fireplaces and listening to the music, and we get another stunning cutscene here, and honestly, the visuals are amazing. We kinda get to see a traditional Vigilia, the Polish Christmas Eve dinner. And if you look closely, you will notice an extra plate on the table, a reference to the Polish tradition of leaving an extra seat at the table. Apparently this may be linked to the pre-Christian Slavic ritual Obiad, a feast held in memory of ancestors and recently deceased tribe members. And during Obiad, participants would sweep an empty chair before sitting to excuse the soul that might occupy it. And after the meal, the table was left untouched so that the dead could take their turn at the banquet. But yeah, this clip is amazing. We find out that Nadimir isn't doing great health-wise, and I wonder why. And Mira gets the wonderful idea of finding the only herb that could help him. The next bonfire is clearly the devs trolling the players, because after you follow some footprints and reach the middle of nowhere, you realize you have to go all the way back to the house. And then right back here. But hey, at least I could enjoy the aesthetics of this area, cause I miss when winters used to look like this. Believe it or not, I'm so old that when I was a kid, we would get these kinds of snow from late November to early March. And in recent years, we only get like a few days each year. There was one winter where the snow was so heavy that the streets were so frozen that the cars couldn't drive on it. And when they did, they would leave these heavy ice marks on the road, which was perfect for me because I could skate on them. I actually went to school on skates once. And we used to go sledding as well, which was great. There's also a cool detail in the game. There's a path that's only available if you plant a tree here in the spring timeline, and by the winter the tree falls over and becomes your bridge. One of the coolest scenes in the game is when Mira goes to find the fern flower and we encounter a trapped Leshy. Now a Leshy, also called Lesaur Porovi, is a forest spirit often described as an old man with a beard and antlers surrounded by animals. He appears to woodcutters or hunters who destroy trees or kill animals excessively, and if you respect the forest, the Leshy can help you, even guide you to safety. We find out that some crazy scientist guy tried to harness Leshy's powers, which is why it's trapped. And we find a lab where we can make a potion that will free him. And this mix of ingredients actually makes sense because all of them are connected to beliefs about protection, healing and magic. Like rhizomes were thought to have protective and magical properties, sometimes used in charms or amulets to ward off evil spirits. Mushrooms often had spiritual significance, linked to both danger and insight. Garlic hung in windows over doors or worn as necklaces, and it was believed to repel evil spirits. And peach leaves symbolized wisdom, longevity, and protection, so using them in charms could safeguard homes or livestock. And after we mess around in the lab, we finally free the Leshy and get another fire cutscene where he calls us an ash-covered warrior. And I got instant Dark Souls 3 flashbacks again.
Ah, well met, Ashen One.
Leshy then helps us get to the other side and try to pick the magical flower for healing from the frozen lake. And that's basically it for the winter timeline. The last winter event releases the final fiery feather, which we can use in the spring timeline to scare away the drowners from the baby and unlock the game's ending. And this is where I completely lost my mind. You see, I had to get back to the cave from the summer timeline, but I didn't actually remember where it was because it's not marked on the map, but I knew that you could reach it through a waterfall. And since I have this horrible medical condition called being a woman, I am not good with directions. So first, I went to the wrong waterfall, then got stuck underwater, had to reload from the last autosave, then went to the cave in the wrong season and it was locked, then I had to switch timelines, run across half of the map to find a bonfire, I switched back to the winter timeline and then I realized that I actually lost the item required for this when I reloaded. So I had to redo everything, rescue the baby again, switch timelines again, find the cave again, and finally, I finished the game. And that's how I lost 40 precious minutes of my life. Anyway, in the cave we complete the final quest, stabilize the entire timeline, and return to the opening scene where Mira and Nadimir argue. But since the past and future changed, their conversation now has a different outcome. So that's it, folks. That's my gameplay and analysis of the Polish indie game, The End of the Sun. The End of the Sun is a stunning indie game that captures some of the most fascinating aspects of Polish and Slavic culture, mythology, legends and superstitions, all wrapped in a neo-pagan aesthetic. Sure, a few moments feel cringy or over the top, but the game itself is so charming that it ends up being more campy than anything. Of course, you can't expect KCD 2-level graphics since it's a small indie game made in Unity, but the visuals are still beautiful, well, except for the character animations, but that's mostly a Unity problem. And honestly, it adds to the lo-fi vibe of the game. My favorite part, of course, is the music. I love the EGD's rendition during the Midsummer Night scene, the cozy background track during the winter timeline in Nadimir and Mira's house, and especially the song at the cemetery. The creators clearly poured their hearts into this game, and I enjoyed every second of it, even when I got lost for 40 minutes. So I hope I managed to get you interested in the game and that you'll enjoy playing it as much as I did. So shout out again to Jakub Machowski and Kinga Machowska-Rafała. I wish them the best of luck in their future endeavors and hope they continue creating cool things like this game. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. I'm thinking about making more videos like this because I'm not happy with my old Grey Dawn review and I'm currently playing Someday You'll Return, plus Black Book and One-Eyed Liko are also on my list. So let me know if you're interested. With that said, thanks for tuning in and have a nice day.
Janicko Welica.